So I watched Toy Story.
Yeah.
For the most part. I went back, watched the regular game too. But pretty dominant win, I'd say, for the Jags. Maybe the 23-7 doesn't even do it justice. It was a struggle offensively for Atlanta.
Yes. Largely prompted by Desmond Ridder playing terribly and throwing the ball to the defense multiple times. Pretty bad. Pick 6 by Darius Williams. That wasn't great. He had a second one like right after that because the Toy Story, the broadcast on Toy Story was quite delayed.
Yeah.
So at one point I was like, "Is yours as delayed as mine is?" I was watching both. I had the Toy Story on the iPad just to see if there was anything interesting on it, and then I had the main broadcast on the TV, and it's like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes off in terms of sync. So I was like, well, okay. Is yours as far behind as mine? How many picks has Desmond Ridder got right now?
I said, no, there's another one.
Right. I was like, yeah, give it a minute because we're about to have a second one coming up. And then he tried to throw a third as well. It's like, God, I was asking after the first one, I asked Twitter, like, how long before Taylor Heineke is starting games in Atlanta? And then by the time everyone was actually replying, it was after the second one. They're like, halftime in a minute, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for the Falcons, it goes back to that, our preseason discussion about Desmond Ridder. If he's not the guy, that could be rough. It was, if you had, what did I make the statement before? If they had Ryan Tannehill there, not that Ryan Tannehill is great,
right?
But imagine Ryan Tannehill with those weapons, with a familiar play caller like Arthur Smith. I think you'd have some success.
Let me test drive a take for you. Everyone has been saying up until last night, the Jets need to trade for Kirk Cousins. Atlanta actually makes way more sense to trade for Kirk Cousins than the Jets do.
Like in season?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah. Well, Atlanta,
the Vikings aren't going to do that, but
no. Atlanta, number one, has draft picks that they can spend, as opposed to the Jets, where they're all tied up in this Aaron Rodgers saying that they can't actually trade them. Number two, Atlanta actually can win things with Cousins. Like, they're not this rebuilding franchise tanking for Caleb Williams. Even with Desmond Ridder, they might win enough games where they have no shot whatsoever at somebody like Caleb Williams. So Kirk Cousins actually makes this team quite a dangerous and capable franchise, like this season now. And they're in position to sort of keep on going. And number three, like, they could be the team that goes, yeah, he's good enough. Let's pay him the extension that he's going to be looking for, and let's do this whole thing. Sure, the Vikings might not do it in season because they would have nothing and they just won this game. But on the other hand, they're probably getting rid of him anyway at the end of the year. Like, all they would need to do is reach the point where they go, this season's not going anywhere. What the hell?
Yeah, that's all right. The test drive. Let the people handle your test drive take there. Cousins to Atlanta. But yeah, it was.
How many turnover-worthy plays did Ridder end up with?
I think he ended up with just the 3.
Because there's at least a 4.
But there's negative.
Iffy.
But there's he got sacked 4 times. And remember, coming into the game when we were previewing this, we talked about the Jags pass rush, second worst pass rush grade going into the game. And we talk a lot on the show and how much that is dependent on the quarterback, also dependent on the coverage. It did feel like. On Toy Story, you had the all-22 view. Like they were in empty, and they had Bijan out in the slot. He was open, according to the Toy Story game, and Ridder ends up taking a sack instead on that play. There's a lot of play. They handle pressure. I did see our friend J.T. O'Sullivan tweet, and I was sensing it as well. You have an overload pressure from the Jags, and Ridder tries to do the whole we'll just juke the blitzer, and he runs into another sack. But J.T. O'Sullivan was saying, hey, can we get some hot route answers here? Like when there's a blitz, you're supposed to have some sort of route to throw. Atlanta not having that. So, I mean, it's Ridder, but the whole thing was a bit of a mess. You have to have a QB-friendly system that has answers for the blitz. And Ridder's taking these negative plays that, he doesn't need to be taken. So it was ugly offensively for Atlanta. I think a good solid game for the Jags. They needed it. They're still very inconsistent. I think they needed to take care of business in this one. They were favored. They're back to 2-2. I'm looking for, from a Jacksonville standpoint, more week-to-week consistency. They also, there was some questions about whether or not Trevor Lawrence was forcing the ball to Calvin Ridley a little bit too much the first few weeks. Only the 2 targets for Ridley. One of them was the broken play, 30-yard touchdown. Beyond that, it was Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram getting 20 out of the 30 targets for that offense. So that was good, just from a Jacksonville standpoint, to see them spread the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, and simply the receivers stopped letting them down. The first couple of, or the last couple of weeks, they had been either dropping touchdowns or simply not getting their feet down for touchdowns. And this week, you get a play where Calvin Ridley makes an ad-lib adjustment that results in a touchdown. So it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other, which was obviously helpful. I thought the Toy Story thing was kind of so. I'm not, the target demographic for the Toy Story broadcast, whoever that was. I'm not 100% certain.
My 4 kids, they were locked in.
Cool. So that makes sense, right? But I do think those things are fun just for the tweets,
Yeah.
Like, there's always funny tweets that come out of those, regardless of whether or not you think the actual broadcast is worthwhile or not. There was one that was from somebody called Riley, because they used a slinky dog to measure the first down. Instead of the sticks and the chains, they use Slinky Dog, which frankly is not any more dumb than using sticks and a chain for a $9 billion industry.
Do that in real life.
Yeah. So Riley tweeted, "It's got to be demoralizing to get a penalty and watch Slinky Dog back that ass up to rub it in." So when they go from 1st and 10 to 1st and 15, you need 5 more yards of Slinky Dog backside.
I thought it was well done. It was funny. There was a few times Atlanta looked like they were lining up off sides. Like the guard was just next to the defensive tackle. It's like,
yeah, there was some.
What about Juwan Taylor?
There was some issues with the accuracy of the chip and the shoulder pad information.
Yeah,
which would make you, question some other stats out there using chip and the shoulder pad data.
Well, it was no comment there. So the Jags are going to stay in London. They're going to play the Bills next week,
but they have to change hotels
in that 9:30 Eastern time slot. Do you want to tell that story?
I mean,
10 seconds.
They said it in the broadcast. Apparently, they're staying in London, but they have to change hotels midweek because apparently Buffalo has booked the hotel that Jacksonville are currently in. Now, they didn't specify whether that was deliberate or not by the Buffalo Bills, but if it was, it's one of the greatest moments of shithousery I've ever heard of.
Buffalo Bills playing chess over here.